Shedeur Sanders walked in, stoic, expression unreadable, and what happened next split the internet clean down the middle. Instead of speaking, Shedeur locked his lips, tossed an imaginary key, and mimed a silent performance that lasted barely 20 seconds, but sent shockwaves to the NFL echo chamber for days. Some people called it childish. Others called it art. But here's the uncomfortable question nobody wants to ask. Was Shedeur Sanders silently shutting down the noise, or silently folding under pressure? If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed. Because for all the praise, all the applause, and all the armchair sociology about narrative control, what we saw that day might have also been something less glamorous. A young quarterback caught in the crosshairs of a league that doesn't wait for you to grow up, and choosing theater over leadership. And before you leap to cancel me, hear this out. Rex Ryan came in hard. No doubt. The man essentially launched a verbal missile across studio airwaves, painting Shedeur as immature, entitled, and unready to be taken seriously at the pro level. He wasn't just questioning Sanders' arm strength or pocket presence. He was questioning his character. And sure, it was brash, borderline unprofessional, and soaked in boomer-flavored bitterness. But the truth is, that's exactly the kind of scrutiny Shedeur is going to face every single week in the NFL. Whether you like it or not, that is the job. And how did Shedeur respond? Not with composure, not with clarity, not with deflection or a dig of his own. He responded with a mime routine, one that felt less like power and more like retreat. Let's be clear, silence can be power. Sometimes, saying nothing is the smartest move in the room. But when you're the quarterback, the face of the franchise, the leader in the huddle, the guy expected to take media heat with the same calm you'd use calling an audible on 3rd and long, don't you need to show something more than clever protest? This wasn't a player saying, I'm above this. It felt like a player saying, I don't know how to handle this. And that's not something to meme. That's something to worry about. Because what happens when the noise gets louder? When the criticism is coming from teammates, not analysts. When the fans are booing, the coach is questioning, and the spotlight gets hotter. Are we going to get mime shows then, too? Now, Mary Kay Cabot came in with a different take, and let's be fair, hers was strong. She framed the moment as strategic restraint. She reminded us that Shedeur has been under scrutiny since before he could legally drive, that growing up as Deion Sanders' son, being dissected under a microscope is nothing new. And in that context, yes, refusing to fuel the media fire is something admirable, but it's also safe, it's controlled, it's PR chess. And maybe that's fine, but maybe that's also a little disappointing. Because there's something you want from your quarterback, especially one who came into the league with this much attention. You want poise, not just silence. You want command, not just gestures. You want a guy to stand at the podium, take the bullets, and own the moment. What Shedeur did wasn't owning it. It was redirecting it, flipping it, spinning it, but it wasn't leading. And look, this is not about piling on the kid. He's got poise. He's got talent. And yes, he's got more media savvy than most players twice his age. But this league doesn't care if you're media savvy. It cares if you can lead 52 men and win under pressure. And whether or not this mime moment was genius or meltdown, it didn't exactly scream, franchise guy. It screamed, I'm over it. And who could blame him? He's been torn apart by the press. He's been put under a microscope since college. He's been doubted, overhyped, mocked, praised, chewed up, and spun around by a sports ecosystem that can't seem to make up its mind about him. But still, this is a job. And in the NFL, especially as a quarterback, you don't get to mime your way through the hard parts. You got to speak. You got to face it, even when it's ugly. Because right now, this whole thing is being remembered as a clapback, as a W against Rex Ryan. But if you zoom out just a little, it starts to look more like a warning sign. A young player, clearly under stress, choosing satire over substance. And while it's entertaining, and it was, let's be honest, it's also telling. This wasn't just a player rejecting criticism. It was a player rejecting the process of being criticized. And that's dangerous territory, especially in a league where no one escapes scrutiny forever. Shedur's talent isn't in question. His potential is sky high. But the real test won't be whether he can go viral. It'll be whether he can take a punch and still stand tall, without props, without performance, without theater. Just him, at the mic owning the moment like the leader everyone says he's becoming. And maybe next time he's up there, when the lights come on and the questions start flying, he'll leave the mime gloves at home. Because silence might win headlines. But voice, presence, and composure, that's what wins locker rooms. So what do you think? Was Shedur's press conference moment a brilliant mic drop or a red flag in disguise? Is this the new face of athlete empowerment or a warning sign about pressure, ego, and image in the modern NFL? Hit the comments, argue it out, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the messiest, wildest, and most unpredictable moments in sports drama. Because if this is what Shedur's backup era looks like, imagine the chaos when he finally takes the field. Because let's be real, this wasn't even about football. Not really. This was about identity, image, expectations. And a question every young athlete eventually has to answer when the hype fades and the headlines turn. Who are you when the noise gets deafening? And Shedur? He answered, sort of, by saying nothing. He said a lot. But he also left just enough ambiguity for people to wonder. Was this silent strength or was it shield? Was this a young man taking control of the story? Or hiding from Paige? And don't get twisted. This isn't some bitter kids these days lecture about respecting the game. Shedur Sanders does respect the game. You can see it in the way he trains, the way he watches film, the way he's quietly absorbed the hardest lesson the NFL teaches its rookies. You are not owed anything. Not minutes. Not media love. Not even patience. So no, the Mime Act wasn't lazy or careless. It was deliberate. It was planned. It was one of the few cards he could play in a moment where everything else would be twisted against him. But that's also part of the issue. He's already playing defense before the season even really starts. And that's where things get tricky. Because you have to ask, why does a 22-year-old third-string quarterback feel like he's fighting the entire media machine just to stay upright? Maybe it's the last name. Maybe it's the Instagram followers. Maybe it's the Deion-sized shadow following him through every facility and media call. But it's clear Shedur is not being given the same grace most young players get. And yeah, that's not fair. But it is real. And the NFL doesn't care if it's fair. It cares if you're ready. And that's what this mime moment was ultimately about. Readiness. For some, it proved it. For others, it cast doubt. But either way, it cemented something important. Shedur Sanders is a player you have to pay attention to. Even when he doesn't speak, he makes noise. And that's rare. Still, the question lingers like smoke. Is this really how a franchise quarterback behaves? Not everyone's sold. And honestly, they shouldn't be yet, because viral moments aren't wins. Followers aren't stats. Silence isn't leadership. And if Shedur wants to truly silence the critics, it's not going to happen on a podium. It's going to happen in the pocket, with pressure in his face, with 3rd and 8 on the line. That's when we'll know. But for now, we have a press conference, a meme, a firestorm, and a fan base split down the middle. Half calling him a genius, half calling him immature, and all of us still watching. And that is the one thing no one can take away from him. Because love him or hate him, Shedur Sanders made sure no one in the league, in the media, or on the internet could ignore him. And maybe, just maybe, that's the only move he needed to make. For now. But the real story, that'll be written on Sunday. And when Sunday comes, all the noise, all the headlines, all the clever mime routines and media debates fall away. Because that's when the only thing that matters is what happens between the lines. What happens when the snap hits his hands, the pocket collapses, and he has 2.5 seconds to prove he belongs. Not on social media, not on TV, but in this league. And that's where Shedur will have to answer the only question that actually matters. Can he play? Not can he go viral. Not can he out-meme Rex Ryan. Not can he finesse a press conference into a moment of cultural commentary. Can he throw the ball? Can he read defenses? Can he take a hit and bounce back? Can he lead grown men in a huddle without the spotlight making him flinch? Because say what you want about the NFL, It doesn't care how smart your media strategy is if you're throwing picks in the red zone. It doesn't care how patient or poetic your silence is if your team's down by 20 and you can't move the chains. It doesn't care that your dad is prime time. It doesn't care that you're famous. It just cares if you win. That's why this whole drama, for all its theater, is just Act 1. The real test is coming, and Shedeur knows it. You could see it in his eyes at that press conference. He wasn't just protesting. He was buying time, resetting the energy, trying to clear space in a world that won't stop watching him long enough for him to grow. Because that's the cruel paradox of being Shedeur Sanders. Everyone wants you to prove yourself, but no one wants to let you breathe while you do it. And that's why this moment, this ridiculous, brilliant, frustratingly effective mime routine, is more than just a press conference bit. It's a young man marking a boundary, saying, in the only way he could, back off, I'm working. And maybe he's not polished yet. Maybe he still has a lot to learn about the game, about the pressure, about what it means to carry all this weight with grace instead of gimmick. But you know what? So did every great quarterback who ever picked up a ball. The difference is most of them got to do it in relative peace. Shedeur's doing it with every camera pointed at him, every sentence scrutinized, and every misstep magnified. So yeah, maybe he wasn't ready to answer Rex Ryan's criticism in a way that made every pundit in the room slow clap. Maybe he didn't deliver the perfect soundbite. Maybe he just didn't want to. But he did send a message, loud and clear, without saying a word. And the message was, I'm not here to play your game. I'm here to build mine. The media might not love that. The old school guys definitely won't. But the fans, the locker room, the future teammates and coaches watching to see what this kid is really made of, they'll get it. Because it takes more than just talent to survive in the NFL. It takes grit. It takes focus. It takes the guts to not break when you're being told you're not enough. And the smarts to not swing when you know the hit isn't worth it. That's what Shedeur showed. Not perfection. Not polish. But refusal to let someone else write his story. So the critics can keep talking. Rex can keep squinting at maturity like it's a stat on a spreadsheet. The internet can meme and argue and dissect his every move. But at the end of the day, Shedeur did what most players twice his age still struggle to do. He kept his cool. He kept his dignity. And he walked out of that room with the one thing that really matters in this league. Control the narrative. Now he just has to do the hard part. Back it up on the field. Because all the silence in the world won't matter if you can't make noise on game day. But something tells me Shedeur is just getting started. And when he does speak again, it's not going to be at a podium. It's going to be under the lights, with a football in his hand. And this time, everybody's going to listen. And that moment, when Shedeur finally steps on the field again with all eyes watching, and all that noise behind him, will be the truest test yet. Because as clever as composed, as meme-worthy as a mime routine might be, it will never substitute the raw reality of performance. Stats don't lie. Wins don't lie. And in this league, that's all that matters. The narrative, you can shape it, stall it, even flip it with a viral press conference. But ultimately, the NFL is a scoreboard business. The rest is just set dressing. Still, let's not dismiss what Shedeur's already accomplished here. No, it wasn't conventional. No, it wasn't what media vets wanted. But it was a response. It was a calculated stand. A refusal to get dragged into a cycle of forced vulnerability and performative humility just to satisfy an audience that still isn't sure whether to cheer for him or root against him. In that silence, Shedeur made himself the mirror. He forced the media, the fans, the critics to examine their own expectations and maybe, just maybe, recognize how absurd it all is. That we expect affection from a 22-year-old who has barely been given a room to breathe, much less lead. And that's the double standard that Mary Kay Cabot called out with such clarity, because we've seen countless young quarterbacks come into the league with far fewer eyes on them and far more patience given. They struggle, and it's called development. Shedeur struggles, and it's called entitlement. He skips one question, and it becomes a headline. He mimes through a presser, and suddenly he's branded a diva. Meanwhile, a dozen other quarterbacks throw tantrums, storm off stages, call out teammates, and it's just passion. But Shedeur tries to flip the script, and it's treated like a scandal. So yeah, maybe what we saw wasn't just a mime act. Maybe it was armor, because silence protects you in ways that words can't. It doesn't get misquoted. It doesn't get taken out of context. It doesn't give your critics ammo. It doesn't put your teammates in awkward positions. And it doesn't make a circus bigger. It quietly walks out of the tent. And Shedeur? He walked out of that tent holding the narrative in one hand and his dignity in the other, which is more than we can say for Rex Ryan. Because let's not forget how this all started. Rex didn't just offer an honest critique. He wasn't doing player analysis. He was performing, loud, dramatic, heavy-handed. Like a man auditioning for the Hot Take Hall of Fame. He didn't want to start conversation. He wanted to set off a grenade and walk away with his ratings intact. But he underestimated Shedeur. And he definitely underestimated how tired people are of the old-school gatekeepers trying to police how young players carry themselves. Because whether it's social media, branding style, or silence, this generation of athletes doesn't move to the beat of a coach's whistle. They move with intention, with message, and with full awareness of the machine they're navigating. Shedeur may be young, but he's not naive. He knows exactly what's being said, what's being whispered, and what's being implied. And still he doesn't break. He doesn't cave. He doesn't cry foul. He just zips his lips, throws away the key, and lets the rest of us scramble to catch up. And that's what makes this whole thing so compelling. Because the truth is, we don't know yet if Shedeur Sanders will be a great NFL quarterback. We don't know if he'll earn a starting job, make a playoff run, or live up to the gravity of that last name. But we do know this. He's already shown us a kind of leadership we rarely see. The kind that doesn't scream. The kind that doesn't posture. The kind that holds a storm in its chest and walks through the fire anyway. That's what made the mime moment more than a meme. It was a message to the league, to the critics, to the fans, to Rex. You can talk all you want, but I choose how I respond. And that's control. That's composure. That's the mindset of someone who's not here to impress you. They're here to outlast you. So whether you saw a tantrum or a tactical move, whether you laughed or winced, just remember this. In a room full of noise, Shedeur Sanders made silence feel loud. And sometimes that's the boldest play you can make. But if silence was Shedeur's power play, Sundays where the real answers unfold. When the camera is turned to the turf instead of the podium, when defenders aren't just metaphorical, and when a blitz won't be from social media. That's the only language the league speaks fluently. Shedeur knows this. And what's fascinating is that, after all this, he's bought himself something incredibly rare in this league. Intrigue. Not everyone's sold. Not everyone's a believer. But everyone's watching. And in a league flooded with forgettable names and second-string stats, being impossible to ignore is a currency all its own. If he steps on the field and delivers, if he commands a huddle the way he commanded that room with no words, if he throws darts and scrambles like a veteran and finishes drives instead of memes, then all of this, all of it, becomes a prequel to the rise. And suddenly that mime act, that's not just restraint. That's the moment the main character refused to be reduced to a punchline. But let's also entertain the other possibility. What if he doesn't deliver? What if the plays don't click? What if the reality of being third string morphs from narrative tension to NFL finality? Well, then this whole chapter becomes something else entirely. It becomes a story about potential not fully realized. It becomes a moment that was clever, poignant, even iconic, but also a little sad. The mime becomes a symbol not of brilliance, but of distance, a defense mechanism, a quiet curtain call before the real story ever began. And that's what makes all of this matter so much more than a simple media spat. Because this isn't just about one press conference or one analyst. It's about identity under pressure, about how young athletes are told to market themselves, then punish when they do, about how leadership is still measured in decades-old archetypes, about how being unapologetically different still invites suspicion. It's about legacy and how heavy that can be when you're born with it. Shedeur Sanders is playing a game most people will never understand. Not just football, not just fame, But the game of choosing how much of yourself the world gets to consume, and when, and maybe his silence was a way of saying, not yet. Maybe he was preserving something. His voice, his peace, his focus. Maybe he knew that every mic he steps in front of is a trap. Maybe he knew that even his best answer would become bait. So he chose no answer. He chose to say, you don't get that part of me. And the truth is, he might have been right, because we're still here, still dissecting, still arguing, still replaying a 20-second mime routine like it was a fourth quarter Hail Mary. That's the power of restraint. It leaves room for obsession. So here we are, still in it, still talking about the mime, still wondering what it meant, what it changed, and where it leads. But come Sunday, the cameras will roll, the crowd will roar, and for the first time since all this began, Shedeur Sanders will have the final word. No mimes, no metaphors, no noise, just football. And maybe, just maybe, that's where the real silence gets broken.